Good afternoon, John.
Hi, Marty.
Marty Keller here in Sacramento, John Donovan in Oceanside. We're talking about intentional living and the accountability practice. For those of you watching us for the first time, please feel free to subscribe, hit the like button and all those things. We're now over 100 subscribers. Given the power of this process that we discuss here, 100 seems like an awfully small number, but it's small but mighty. But we invite everybody to share this with others, share this information. A couple things before we get started. I wanted to note that this Wednesday, there is the third annual Collective Trauma Summit that Thomas Hubel put together. I went to the first one a couple of years ago. And I mention it because Gabor Mate and Steve Porges are among the guests this year. And these are a couple of gentlemen who have helped inform our work here. And also, for those of you who might not have seen it, Gabor Mate was on the Joe Rogan podcast recently. And so if you want to check out what Dr. Mate has to say about trauma and recovery, I urge you to consider checking that out. He has a new book out called The Myth of the Normal, and I'm waiting to receive my copy from Amazon, so check out his latest insights. So just a little information to share. A couple of weeks ago, last 2 times ago, we had a conversation about the relationship of the 12 steps to the accountability practice and potential living. And in that time, you went through some thoughts about each of the 12 steps and how they relate to the tree, the accountability tree. The accountability tree is a process that we use here in the accountability practice to work on not only discovering hidden trauma, but helping heal it and helping use that healing process to create intentions, conscious intentions for the life that we want to be living right now.
Mm-hmm.
So what I thought would be useful to do, because there is a separate set of 12 steps that's used in adult children of alcoholics programs that was authored by one of the founders of ACA, who's always been identified as Tony A. And his 12 steps are a little bit different. And I personally think they're more coherent with what we do in the accountability practice than the traditional steps are. So, and for some of us watching this podcast, this may be the first time you've ever heard of the Tony A 12 steps. So if it's okay with you, John, I'd like to put those up on the screen and ask for you, if you're open to it, to kind of walk through them and comment on them based on your perspective as the guy who started this accountability practice.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, let's go through them. Step one, we admitted we were powerless over the effects of living with alcoholism and that our lives had become unmanageable. The regular 12 step says whatever the substance is. For AA, it's alcohol. For NA, it's drugs. And here he talks about the systemic issue of alcoholism, which it doesn't just affect the alcoholic or the Al-Anon codependent, it affects the whole family. And that family of origin dysfunction is what adult children of alcoholics address specifically, and what intentional living addresses specifically. It's like everything that's manifested in my life is coming from me and my experience and how I was treated as a child. I developed a perception of how I relate to the world. So, and when I first got into 12 steps, my life was obviously unmanageable. Although I was a functioning alcoholic adult child, I still struggled with self-esteem, feeling worthy, and that kind of thing. So,
Well, also I struggled with um, just having compulsions that seem to um, make me do things that in my mind I was like, no. It's your three questions that you often start your meetings with. Do you ever find yourself in the middle of an argument, realize that you were wrong, and continue to argue that way anyway? Those other
right,
questions. So that's, to me, that's how unmanageability showed up. Like all
exactly,
kinds of compulsions would seem to take over, and it's like I couldn't control them.
right. You could watch yourself doing it.
Exactly.
Say you don't want to do it, and then just just find yourself in that behavior time after time after time. And the first question is, have you ever heard somebody loved, regretted it, sometimes deeply regret it, saying, I'll never do that again, and 2.5 seconds later, you find yourself in the old behavior. So yeah, it's insidious.
So that's how I understood unmanageability. Yeah, sure,
Right.
functional. Yeah, I could earn a paycheck. I
Yep.
could drive a car. I could arrange for insurance for myself and my family, but when it came to these things, couldn't do it, couldn't manage it.
Hmm. So I don't know where you want to go with these. Do you want to go ahead and just read them for just in case somebody's not
Yeah,
familiar
so
with
second step, uh, Tony's second step, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to clarity. And the traditional steps say we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity.
it?
So there's a universe of difference between sanity and clarity. And for those of you who are just coming to this for the first time, I just point out there is on YouTube available a talk that Tony A gave about why he proposed this set of steps rather than the ones that were derived directly out of Alcoholics Anonymous. Um, and this one is particularly relevant, John, I think, to our practice because clarity is what being accountable brings me.
Right.
Get clear about what's actually going on. What's the truth of my behavior? What's the truth of my belief? What's the truth of how I'm behaving in relationship?
Hmm.
And so for me, that's how I've come to understand what Tony A means about clarity.
Right. And for clarity's sake, um, you and I talk about accountability, and we're familiar with what we mean by that. And if somebody's watching this for the first time, or maybe even the 10th, 15th time, the word accountability is defined in the dictionary as somebody who is held liable, the guilty person, punishable. And what accountability means in the intentional living process, or the capacity to be accountable, is simply stating where you find yourself, usually in a character defect or some type of avoidant behavior, without blame or judgment. The ability to account for where you find yourself with no blame or judgment. And just simply stating that, taking a breath, and feeling what comes to you based on that truth of where you find yourself, without the story that goes with it. Well, I wouldn't have done that if she hadn't. I live in a society where everybody's out to get each other. That story that goes along with I'm mean. Well, okay, no, just say I'm mean. Take a breath. And what I've found in intentional living is that statement of accounting for where I find myself is in resonance with the energy that prompted the meanness. And it speaks to and goes to the childhood trauma, and it aligns. And then the other part of the accountability process is after you take a breath, make the statement, take a breath, you go right into I intend, specific to the statement. If my statement is I mean, I intend to be kind. And it's a transmutation or a, a reframing of that wounded part of myself. And I find myself acting differently based on what's in that subconscious pool of information. So, just for clarity's sake.
So you start to get clarity.
Yes. And it's not so much clarity of being able to figure it out, but a sense of, for me, it's a sense of relief, a sense of okayness, a lack of frenetic energy, like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? This frozen fight, flight, freeze, please energy that I found myself in most of the time pre-recovery and ways into my recovery, still reacting in a way that I would watch myself react and go, why? Just stop. And I couldn't stop whatever the behavior was. For me, it was demeaning and diminishing or yelling or raging. And I didn't want to do it. And yet I found myself doing it time after time after time. So, this accountability tree process gives me the clarity to know that to stay in current reality instead of being what we call associated to past trauma, associated or leave in your leave the situation, like, and they call it in clinical terms being associated, like associated to past trauma, being stuck in this place. So hopefully that helps.
Well, it's almost like clarity can here also mean like clearing a space, clearing out
Like,
old wounds to make way for something new.
yes, very good.
So the third step, again, now here's where Tony's steps really begin to diverge from the traditional steps. We made a decision to practice self-love. We made a decision to practice self-love and to trust in a higher power of our understanding.
Mm-hmm. Which is different than made a decision to turn my life and will over to the power of God as I understand God, which is like, hey, whoa, I don't want to turn something over to somebody. I don't have an idea what it is. So yeah, practice self-love. The fourth one is, and this is where you really make a searching and blameless inventory of our parents, because in essence, we have become them. Wow. And the work in the accountability process is addressing the trauma received as a child, specifically, generally from our parents. So,
can you talk a little bit about the process by which we become our parents? And the way I understand this, and you might have a different one, is that the way I criticize myself and do emotional violence to myself is exactly the way my parents did it.
yeah. As children, we're sensing beings. We sense energy. We hear the words. The words are, I'm not saying they're not important, and there's an energy that my mom and dad held. My dad specifically of belligerence and arrogance and fear. My mom, victim. And we pick that energy up, and it creates in our little bodies chemistry. And the chemistry is generally stressors, because we don't know what's going to happen when. We don't know if we're going to get left or where we're going to find ourselves, or somebody's going to start screaming and yelling. So we are immersed in adrenaline and stressors, and we survive that. So our body recognizes that for me to survive, I have to have this homeostasis or this chemical makeup internally. So we do exactly as we were taught to survive. Now, all this is subconscious. I've talked to a lot of people and they say they're nothing like their dad. I talk to people, I don't want to be like my dad. Oh, okay. And if they were open to observing themselves, they become just like their dad. And out of my own experience, I said out loud, I do not like my dad. I hate my dad. He was an asshole. I am not going to be like him. And at 45, I was 7 years into recovery, and I discovered that, oh my God, I'm just, as much as I tried not to be like him, I turned out exactly like him. There's it's in our subconscious. Our subconscious is a pool of information that we draw on to survive. If in that pool of information, it says stress, screaming, yelling, abandonment, or physical violence is part of being alive, then my subconscious will manifest that in my life no matter what I think I want. I was emotionally, verbally, and sometimes physically violent. I did not want to be violent at all. And the only violence I did recognize was the physical. I did not even recognize how emotionally and verbally violent I was. I saw that as normal. I normalized that behavior and had no idea what was going on. There's an example, I think, I don't know who I was listening to, a person like Gabriel Mate was saying that these two men were talking, and one of them said to the other, "You act just like your dad." Well, the guy that he said that to just denied it, point blank. No, I'm nothing like my dad, because his behavior was coming out of that subconscious. It's like you're not aware of the behavior that comes out of your subconscious. Well, how can that be? Well, an example of that would be people have gone on long trips driving, and they've arrived at a destination and wondered how they got there because they don't remember. They don't remember driving on the freeway. They don't remember getting off the freeway, getting back on the freeway, because that was all coming from our subconscious. That's actually the way we're designed as human beings, is to have this capacity to do things and think otherwise, be someplace else while these rote things are being done. Well, these rote things are screaming, yelling, or having a partner that screams and yells at you, because it's, and you normalize it. You just see it as normal. And when somebody takes issue with it, you defend it. Well, no, we don't do that. There's not that much, and it's not that bad. This family of origin dysfunction, childhood trauma, which according to Gabriel Mate, and I agree 100% with him, that whatever issue you say you find, whether it's emotional, physical, and I want to add spiritual. I didn't hear him say spiritual ailments and or problems that a person has, he can trace them back to family of origin dysfunction, some kind of trauma in your childhood that's unresolved. So cancer, mental health diagnoses, these are all a result of unresolved trauma. So I'm drawing a blank here.
I'm trying to unmute myself here. I think the other thing I want to point out at this step is the word blameless.
Yes.
And that is also one of the principles of the accountability tree: no blame, no judgment. And so here's Tony A introducing this by the fourth step. He introduces clarity, self-love, and now blameless.
Right.
Taking a look, blameless, because this inventory that he's asking us to take a look at, inventory of our parents, is a nice way, a less threatening way for us to take an inventory of ourselves, because in
Yeah.
essence we had become them. So this whole thing that you were just describing, this process where I'm not like my dad, and eventually, as we get clarity, just like you did, we'd start to discover, no, I'm just like that guy.
Yep.
Um, the shift in my life occurred in my early 30s after I'd moved to California from Michigan, and I did not hadn't really liked my old man since I was a teenager, and I found myself in a job. I was in a sales job, and I used to hate my old man because I thought he was a phony salesman, and he was always selling to people, whether it
Yeah.
was selling goods or services or spiritual aphorisms, whatever. And I thought he didn't mean any of it. And then I just realized, well, isn't that interesting? I'm in the same business. My dad was in the printing business. I was in the printing business. My dad was in sales. I was in sales. And I thought to myself, wow, I'm powerless over this. So, all right, I am like my old man.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna, I don't like it, but I'm gonna accept it and see if I can't work with that.
Yeah.
So my
Yeah.
life changed because I had that clarity. I wasn't doing
Mhm.
ACA yet. Certainly wasn't doing intentional living, but I got some clarity, and I was willing to own it.
Yeah.
And that, again, I was starting to do accountability without any of the formal training or information, but I just intuitively recognized I was like my father. And in order for me to own it, then I had to find some kind of blamelessness. It's like, okay, all right, I give up. I'm like my dad.
Yeah.
So the next step, we admitted to our higher power, to ourselves and another human being, the exact nature of our childhood abandonment.
Yeah.
And again, you've already touched on this, but I think this one comes out of the fourth step, out of that inventory.
Yep. Yep. And admitted to our higher power selves into another human being. That happens in the rooms where you go and you sometimes just listen or you talk about what happened. It's like the three rules of a dysfunctional home is don't talk, don't trust, don't feel. And when you go to a meeting, you do all three. Well, maybe you don't talk. I went to meetings for a long time and I didn't talk. But I did listen, and eventually I did start talking about what happened in our family. So,
Well,
so
there's also that dynamic that you've addressed many times on the podcast about um, my trauma came in the presence of people, and so does my healing.
yes, yeah,
So the power of speaking this to others, to another human being, to the group, um, is that it opens myself to the experience of love. Love pervades the universe, pervades the field that we live in. My experience is that when I don't experience love, it's because I'm creating some obstacle to it.
you're right,
Not that it's not there.
right.
And so my willingness to share this with others, to share my struggle, to share my fears, to share my critical judgments of myself, these all come out of this childhood abandonment. There's something wrong with me. I must not be lovable. There must be some flaw, the exact nature of my childhood abandonment.
Mhm.
And that leads to the sixth step, again, as Tony A proposes, we were entirely ready to begin the healing process with the aid of our higher power.
Yeah. Um, Sometimes in my recovery, I didn't recognize healing when it came, or just going to the meetings was powerful in that I put myself with other like-minded people who were looking for something. And the healing I experienced, generally, somebody either had to tell me about it or I'd recognize it in the moment. I call it being blindsided by healthy behavior, where I found myself in a different behavior um, that that was, I want to say, more healthy than I would normally have done. Um, yeah, I'm step 6 and 7. I want to read 7. We humbly ask our higher power to help us with our healing process. Um, I um, I didn't know how to ask for help. I didn't know that I could ask for help. I didn't know that asking for help was an appropriate question. And when I discovered, oh my God, I need help, um, not only my higher power, but anybody else that was around me were willing to support me through this process. We tried to make sense out of this healing process um, the best way we can. The best way I've found was actually addressing the trauma itself through the accountability tree process. And there's a lot going on underneath my awareness and my willingness to look. It, even though sometimes I didn't even know what I was looking for, but that willingness opened me up to a different experience. I embodied the experience, and then that became the motivating information for my now behavior, which if I add to myself, um, it changes the outcome. Um, and I know the 12 steps written by Bill W. and Dr. Bob were absolutely inspired. Um, but sometimes trying to write this stuff down and then have people understand it took me a long time to get to some kind of understanding of the 12 steps. And that understanding came after my experience of some type of shift or difference or um, behavioral change. Although I see the necessity to write this down. I've created a manual on the intentional living, and I've made it as cryptic as I could. Um, in other words, cryptic, like, what are you talking about? It's like,
Yeah, that's what I thought you meant.
I could have written a 30 pages on
Right.
each set. And when I make the decision to try something without knowing everything I think I need to know about it is when magic happens. So, and the 12 steps is a program of attraction rather than promotion, which I think is brilliant. And that's the way I like to see intentional living being a process of attraction. Um, and see where it goes. Maybe the promotion will come later. I don't know. So, and we're doing the best we can to break these steps down, and we'll continue to do that. But I don't know, whoever's listening, I don't know what they're hearing or if we're making sense to them, or hopefully there's something you or I say creates this curiosity where they lean forward or like wonder, how do I find out more, or something like that. So anyway.
I agree. I want to point out that there's analogy in my eyes, and like to get your thoughts. In step six, and actually the next three steps, we were entirely ready is very similar to the verbiage that we use when we say I am willing.
Yes.
And it also implies an intention. So we could state this step, we intend to begin the healing process with the aid of our higher power.
Yes. Yeah.
Because I mean this is an ongoing conversation we have in our accountability practice meetings about intention, the
Mhm.
relationship between intention and what do I have to do? I set the intention, now what do I do? And we keep pointing out that setting intention is not about having to do anything. It's about putting in words what you want with the idea of expecting what you want to manifest and not having a clue how to make it happen.
Correct. Yeah. Which is
Now,
really
in this work, in the 12-step work, we're explicitly expecting that to come from a higher power. In the
correct.
accountability practice, we don't use that word, but the process is still the same.
Correct. Well, the higher power could be the quantum field. It's whatever. I mean, the quantum physics are saying the same thing that the ancient sages said a long time ago, that it's all love. Well, quantum physics says it's all the field. Same. Okay, if that's easier for you to hear, it's in the quantum field, all possibilities. I tap into it through intent or wanting or desire. Um, okay, whatever works. Yes,
Yeah.
works.
Well, he says that in the third step, the higher power of our understanding.
Right.
So I would also just suggest that in step seven, we humbly asked our higher power again that in our work that we set the intention.
Yeah.
That's the way I ask for the higher power's help. I intend to experience love coming at me from every direction, for
Right.
example.
Yeah.
Step eight, we became willing. Here we go, that willing word again. We became
Yeah.
willing to open ourselves. It didn't mean we have to open ourselves. We just became willing to open ourselves to receive the unconditional love of our higher power.
Yeah. Which is way different than the 12 steps. Just making a list of all those people we need to make amends to. Which me becoming willing to receive unconditional love um, is the amends I need for whoever I hurt is to be something different. And they making amends is powerful from the right place. Making amends because I want to be okay or not have this is like some people go to amends too quickly, and they do more damage to themselves and the people around them. So I like this, being willing to open ourselves to receive unconditional love of our higher power.
Well,
Yeah,
and Tony also points out in his talk that the reason he doesn't use the amends language is because little children are not morally capable of creating harm to others.
correct.
And so the amends that you make in AA are the amends of behavior of an adult. And
Yeah,
adults are responsible for what we do.
yes,
So this adult children of alcoholics process, just like intentional living, is seeking to go to those first effects that we had, the effects of living with alcoholism or other dysfunction. That is what created this sense of helplessness and self-recrimination and living in fear and all the things that the ACA laundry list talks about.
hmm
And so Tony was like, no, we want to stay away from blame in this program. We want to focus on healing and learning to love ourselves.
yes,
And that's why it's interesting that way he writes 8 and then 9. 8, we became willing to open ourselves to receive first unconditional love of our higher power. And then 9, secondly, we became willing to accept our own unconditional love by understanding that our higher power loves us unconditionally.
Yeah, I like that.
So the way I read that is, even if I can't, and this is so fake it to make it, even if I can't love myself unconditionally, I can trust that a power greater than myself not only can, but does love me unconditionally. And that I can lean into that as I struggle with my own self-criticism, my own self-abandonment, frankly.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
10, we continue to, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay, 10, we continue to take personal inventory and to love and approve of ourselves.
Oh, yeah. That's where the accountability tree is, like in the moment accountability. Because I say the character defect or what I projected on to my neighbor or my best friend or my wife or my children, and I own it. And that's taking personal inventory of what I'm projecting or what I've come to see myself as. I don't know if that made sense, but and to love and approve of ourselves. Well, when I say I just dismissed my daughter, that's being accountable in the moment without blame or judgment, to love and approve of myself. Not that the behavior, I'm justifying the behavior, I'm bringing the behavior into my awareness without blame or judgment, and that's unconditional love. I was just in a group this morning, and one of the participants says, "Really, unconditional love? We're not capable of that." And I said to her, "Well, would you be willing to consider that you are? And I can give you an example." And she said, "Sure." And I said, "You've done the accountability tree. You owned a character defect. And as soon as you own the character defect, you took a breath. You didn't judge yourself or blame yourself. And then I heard you create an intent. That's you unconditionally loving yourself right where you're at. Like, I don't, the statement doesn't matter. I'm mean or I'm dismissive or I hate myself. Okay, take a breath. When I'm breathing, I'm not thinking. So if I'll do mine. I'm mean to the point of cruelty. And I take a breath, and there's a feeling tone that comes with that. There's a connection to that little boy inside me that was wounded so bad that the only resolution he had was to become mean, get them first. Don't let anybody walk on you. And that keeps people away. And it's all in the subconscious. It works for my survival. And then I say, I'm mean to the point of cruelty, take a breath, no blame, no judgment. I intend to be kind. Well, that's in my experience, that's me being unconditionally loving to myself. Although whatever picture people have of unconditional love is based on their experience as children, and I want to say it's skewed somehow, like somebody, well, Jesus Christ, we can't be Jesus Christ because he was God. So, okay, we're this lowly, wretched, flesh is weak human being. No, we're capable. We're capable. And once it was pointed out to her, she go, oh, because it's not what I conceived it to be from my dysfunction. It was when I experienced it. I told her a story about I went to a workshop, and the guy facilitating the workshop says, one of the things you will experience in this workshop over this 4 days is unconditional love. And I thought, what a jerk. I said, I paid this guy good money and he's bringing me this bullshit about I'm going to experience unconditional love. I was like incensed. And guess what? I experienced unconditional love coming from me to other participants and their unconditional love, no matter what fault I was saying out loud, they were there to support me through this. That's unconditional. So yeah, wow.
One of the my experiences with the what you just said is that my willingness to state my behavior without blame or judgment is an act of unconditional love.
Yes.
I think you just said that.
Yep.
There's no condition to it. I'm just
Right.
stating it. I'm just stating what happened. My willingness then to stay in my body and to feel what happens as a result of my statement is another act of unconditional love, because I'm focusing all of my attention on that feeling process. I'm not doing anything else. And then thirdly, my willingness to answer the question, what do I want, is an act of unconditional love, because I'm willing to listen to my deepest desires.
Yes.
I'm willing to let them present themselves to my awareness.
Right.
And then fourthly, when I set an intention, I intend to experience joy. I intend to approve of myself unconditionally. Another act of unconditional love. It's like I'm trusting the process. I'm taking a chance. This is what I want, and this is what I intend.
Right.
So there's the way I break it down in the accountability tree process. There's 4 separate places that we are activating unconditional love for ourselves.
Yep. Yep.
So step 10, continue to take personal inventory and to love and approve of ourselves.
Right.
That's what we do in the accountability tree work.
Mm-hmm.
11.
Yeah, he has not deviated too much from the AA in the last 2, which, well, the last one, to take this to other individuals suffering, he doesn't have that in there. But yeah, then we sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with our higher power, praying only for the knowledge of his will in our lives and the power to carry it out. That's verbatim. I like that step, even though I didn't understand that step for the first 20 years of my recovery. I like that step.
Well, and the beauty of it is it doesn't prescribe how that's supposed to happen.
Right.
So we're just praying for knowledge of God's will and for the power to act upon it.
Right. And the key word here is sought, become a seeker.
Right.
Yeah, that's really, I like that. So.
And then 12th, we've had a spiritual awakening as a result of taking these steps, and we continue to love ourselves and to practice these principles in all our affairs.
There you go.
It's like saying, I continue to love myself and to work the accountability tree every chance I get.
Right. At home, at work, on the baseball field, on the freeway. Oh my God. Yeah, in all my affairs, in every aspect, doing the laundry, cooking breakfast.
Yeah.
Driving to work, being at work. Yeah, all of my affairs.
Watching political news.
Oh yeah. Oh really? You do that? It's like, oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, because everybody that I cast aspersions on is me.
Yeah. Yeah, some form or another.
So yeah, so that's the Tony A 12 steps. I think they're more explicitly in alignment with the accountability practice. But either way, the question that our listener asked us for was to take a look at the relationship between the 12 steps and the accountability practice. So
Yeah.
So I think we've done a pretty thorough job. So I invite our friend who asked us those questions, if there's anything that's still not clear that you still have curiosity about, that you have my email, send me a note. We'll pick it up.
One of the other things, and we do have time to address, is like she was asking about how to help children be accountable.
Well, I think the way she's saying is how to teach this practice.
Teach the practice, right? Let me offer what I know based on listening to Rudolf Steiner and other people like H. Stephen Glenn, how to build capable young people. From the age of 1 to 7, they're in the theta state. So they just soak up energy. It's like they listen to what you say and they soak up the energy. So if I'm saying to my children something like, you can do anything you want, and you can be anybody you want. This is, and I'm holding this energy of resentment, bitterness, contempt towards people I am judging as stupid or ignorant. They pick up that energy. It doesn't matter what I'm saying. And then they act it out. They actually the energetic marker out. And from the ages of 7 to 14, what children need is to be loved, feel love from the authority figure. My grandson just turned 7. So my intent with him is for him to know that I love him no matter what. Is for him to feel the love I have for him, and not, I don't, when he does something, I praise his abilities, his dexterity, his agility, his strength. I wish I had this perfect, but I don't say that was good, because good is much of a judgment as bad. And he'll attach some, like, I got to do this to be good. To no, that was he got a little prize for, he does this parkour class, and he got this little sticker that he turned into the front desk, and he gets prizes, and he got it for doing something that was difficult. And I said, wow, that was good. What was the difficult thing? And he said, oh, he kind of blew it off. But anyway, I want him to know, as an authority figure, because I am his mom, me, his teachers, and his teachers specifically at Waldorf School know this. They know this, that's part of their developmental stage. So they give them love. Rudolf Steiner used to go into a class, and if he saw any problem with any of the students, he would not address the student. He would go to the teacher and said, would you be willing to look at your capacity to love this child? Because you're the authority figure. That's my charge. Not easily done, especially coming from family of origin dysfunction and this conditioning I've had in the culture that I grew up in. And I'm capable. It is my intent to let him know that I love him.
So I think we were talking about this before we started the podcast. That period of our lives, up until at least adolescence, is not necessarily a place where we need to learn the accountability practice, because we're not really there yet.
So
because we're still growing.
Go ahead and say so. I'm going to go up and close the door and I'll be right back.
Okay.
So do children need to do accountability process? Well, I'm in the addiction field. I work with people who, this is our goal, our clinical goal, as outlined in clinical terms, to assist them to create emotional regulation, frustration tolerance, impulse control, and delayed gratification. So if my grandson has the energy around him of my healthy being from ages 1 to 7, I wish that were completely pure, and feels loved by an authority figure from ages 7 to 14, he is learning emotional regulations. He will take emotional regulation into his life at 14. He will learn impulse control. One of the things he did when he got his ticket is that he showed the ticket, and she said, well, you can have this little thing, or you can wait and build it up and you can get a little snack thing. He said, oh, I'll wait. Delayed gratification. He's 7 years old, and he understands that if he waits, he gets something that he wants, and he's able to wait. Um, and he's learning impulse control and delayed gratification, frustration tolerance, and emotional regulation. So if he has embodied those, then when he turns 14 or whatever his next developmental stage is, he'll be able to deal with whatever comes to him and make lucid choices instead of being stuck in a reaction mode of abandonment, um, being having copious amounts of trauma, whether it's feeling somebody's energy that wasn't his. He'll be a well-adjusted individual. Not that he'll have no problems. Part of life is maneuvering through the struggle, um, for whatever the grand plan is. I don't claim to know that, but to participate in life, and participate in the struggle, to build community, to do this together, to understand that survival isn't of the fittest, it's of the people who can cooperate the most and come together in community and cooperate. And I'm going to get cosmic and bring in the new earth, like Eckhart Tolle talks about. This generation that's coming up has the capacity to bring in the new earth. It's like, what does that mean? I don't know. It's none of my business. I'm just going to nurture and support him. So he's at least seeing that or thinking about it or observing it. All right. So anyway.
So here's a question.
Got it.
Then do children, particularly, let's talk school age kids. So Solomon's what, second grade?
Right.
Or whatever, however they do it in Waldorf. Do kids need to be taught to feel their feelings?
Yes. And he needs guidance. In a Waldorf school, they don't tell him what not to do. They suggest something different. They don't go, oh, that was wrong. They go, oh, would you be willing to try? And they offer options to them. Or if they see that they handle themselves in an appropriate manner, set up a boundary. I was in his class one time, and they were in playtime, and they had the trains and stuff out. And this one young child was building a bridge, and another child came over and picked up one of his pieces and took it over to another area. Well, he simply went over to him and said, I was playing with that first. Would you please give it back? So the child did, and he went back and started playing, and the teacher said, you did that well. That's all she said. You did that well. And affirmed when they're in that place. Those Solomon's early childhood education teacher, it's like she's a wizard. I mean, she has 25-year-olds, and they're all just kind of maneuvering around where she's firm. One of the ways they change what they're doing is that they sing the instructions to them. You know, playtime inside is over. Now it's time to go outside and put your mud shoe. And the kids just move, put stuff away, and then go to the next event. Solomon, when we take him out, he is, thank you for that. And he talks to people. He was like talking to, and he said, I don't know your name. It's like to this clerk, and she goes, oh, it's Nicole. And he says thank you and please, and I've never asked that. I've never said you need to say thank you. No, when he does something I say thank you. I say you're welcome, and then he just does it. It's amazing. I give him the example, and he follows it. It's amazing. I'm grateful for what I know, and to be able to do this with him. So
I think that that one of our correspondents' questions about kids is that the question of supporting them feeling their feelings. And I think that I'd like you to comment on that because there's the insight that you've had about the distinction, for example, between being angry and being violent. And so kids have a lot of energy, and sometimes that energy becomes exuberant to the point of violence, and not violence in the sense of, being directed at somebody, although it can be. Um,
Mhm.
so any thoughts about how to help kids? I mean, we want our kids to feel their feelings, right?
Yep.
Without necessarily acting on those feelings in a way that could cause harm to themselves or others.
Well,
And we don't want, and at the same time, we don't want to discourage them from feeling what they're feeling, because then they'll end up in accountability practice meetings sooner or
right.
later.
Okay. So I'm playing a card game with Solomon War, and I win a war where he puts three down, I put a card, he puts a card, I won. So he flips his cards over, and oh my God, both jokers, both jokers were in that pile. He went ballistic. I don't like this game. You always win. And what I did was, I see you're frustrated. Oh my God, that must hurt. If I lost my two jokers, I would be really disappointed and hurt. And no, I don't want to talk to you. No, and I didn't take it away from him. And I set up, I got off the chair to go rub his back or console him. He had nothing, he didn't want anything to do with that. He ran to the wall, put his back against the wall, and was crying. So I just breathed. I took breaths. I see you're frustrated. I don't want you to talk to me. Okay, okay. No. And then after what seemed to me like 10 minutes, probably only 30 seconds, but he comes back and he goes, Grandpa, I'm ready to play. That's okay. He said, you know what? I'm going to hold it this time. Yes. Yes. And what he was referring to was his response. So, and I said, okay, let's go. And then we played some more. And when we were done, because he didn't hold it really well, but he held it. It was different. I said, Solomon, I want you to know that you did well holding your feelings. He said, thank you, Grandpa, and moved on to his next thing.
So, so are there any, we just have a few minutes left here. Are there any general principles then from your experience that you can share with teachers and parents of young kids?
Be what you want them to be. This is my intent with my own children and my grandson. I want to exemplify the behavior that I see that would be beneficial to them. Instead of telling them what to do, I hold the energy. They can do whatever they want. I'll respond in appropriate. I'll either keep myself safe depending on what's going on. And no blame, no judgment. So yeah, be what you want them to be. Exemplify for them. Instead of saying, this is for you, like you do this, and then while I'm telling him to do this, I'm being dismissive. And don't be dismissive. It's like, well, that's dismissive. Tell him what to do. He's learning. So yeah, it takes effort. It takes forethought. It takes intention. It and I don't do it perfectly. And it is my intent to exemplify for him what I want for him.
Well, it seems to me also that what could be of value is to um, work with other adults who are in similar situations to support one another
Yeah,
in learning. For example, just the language. How do I reward somebody without saying that was good?
right,
Because one has to retrain oneself. That's accountability practice is retraining ourselves.
correct.
So it seems to me that certainly those are issues that could be raised in an accountability practice meeting,
Mm-hmm.
so that people can get support, they can get different insights, they can share experiences.
Right.
There is what I'm hearing you say is there's not There's not a magic wand, cut and dried formula here. This is experiential. And so if I'm going to exemplify or personify the spirit that I want my children to be experiencing, then I got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, me too. When he does some athletic thing, instead of saying that was good, I say, your muscles are strong. That was very agile. You are agile. And that puts him in a sense of inside his body. And so, and I'm gonna continue to do this the best way I can and catch myself when I don't,
Yeah.
for sure.
Well, John, our time together is coming to a close, as it always seems to do.
Mhm.
Before we go, I want to invite anybody who's listening for the first time or the 100th time. If you haven't come to an accountability practice meeting or you haven't been to one for a while, at the end of the podcast, there'll be the information on how to contact me and John, and we'll be happy to get you Zoom addresses. There's meetings Monday evening at 6:30. These are all Pacific times. Monday evening 6:30, Tuesday afternoon 4:30, Wednesday afternoon at 4, Thursday evening at 6:30, and Saturday morning at 8:30. All Pacific time, all on Zoom, available to a worldwide audience. Um, there's nothing like being in the practice to understand the practice. So we encourage everybody who would like to experience the possibilities of what we're talking about here for yourselves to check us out, come to a meeting. We'd love to have you. When you come to a meeting, there are no requirements. We don't require you to do anything. We ask you to, in some of our meetings, we may ask you to introduce yourself. We have a check-in little formula. You don't have to do that either. You can say, I pass. And nobody will make you bad for that. So, or others have come to meetings and jumped right in and started doing some difficult emotional work. It's all free, whatever you want to do. So, John, happy birthday! You just had a birthday recently, and so did I. We're Virgos here, and
Mhm.
so congratulations on another year, starting a new year on the planet.
I've reached another personal best.
Exactly.
Oh, man, and I plan to do a lot more.
Yeah. And I intend to learn something I had no idea of this year. At least one thing.
Yeah, there you go. Me too.
All right, John. Thank you so much. We'll talk to you in
You're
2
so-
weeks.
You got it.
Bye.
Bye.